Hello, everyone. Today we will walk through how to submit a wage report using the delimited file format. A delimited file is a plain text file where data is separated by a specific character. For wage submissions in MyUI, data is separated by a comma. Delimited files are created using either text applications such as Notepad for Windows or TextEdit for Mac. Delimited files can also be created using Excel, where the boundaries between each cell take the place of the commas. For this video, we will be using Notepad to build our file. To help build this file, we'll reference the delimited file format instructions available in the Employer and TPA Resources section of MyUI University. We will keep these instructions open on the left side of our screen so we can follow along as we go. One more note before we begin. Delimited files are also a variable length file format, meaning the fields may not take up the maximum allowed length depending on the data you need to include. With that, let's begin. Wage reports submitted via the delimited file format have two record types, employer header records and employee detail records. All delimited files will begin with an employer header record. In the left-hand corner of the Notepad application, it will show you the position your cursor is at. We are currently at line 1, column 1. Starting at line 1, column 1, we will enter the record identifier for the employer. The record identifier for the delimited file format is always RE. We will then enter the reporting period with the 4-digit year and 2-digit quarter. The quarter should reflect the last month of the reporting period, so quarter 1 is represented by 03, quarter 2 by 06, quarter 3 by 09, and quarter 4 by 12. So for quarter 1 of 2026, we will enter 202603. We will now enter the employer account number, also known as the EAN. Enter the actual employer account number assigned by the state of Michigan, which is typically 7 characters, although it could be shorter. Placing a comma will signal you have entered the relevant characters in this field and are ready to move on to the next data field. Please note that this number is distinct from your FEIN or MIN. Now we can enter the employer name. This field has a 60-character limit. Employer names can be alphanumeric and feature spaces as needed. We will then enter the address for the business. This field is also alphanumeric and contains a 45-character limit. If there is a second address line, we can then place it in the next field. Otherwise, enter an additional comma and proceed to the next criteria. Now we will add the city name. Note that there is a 35-character limit for this field. We can now add the 2-character state abbreviation for the employer's location. Now add the 5-digit zip code for the employer. Note that this field only accepts numbers. Next, add the 4-digit zip code extension for the employer. If there is no zip code extension, simply add a comma instead. Next, we will insert Y if the employer has the apportionment program indicator activated, and insert N if the employer has the apportionment program indicator deactivated. If the employer wishes to request apportionment for the first quarter taxes, the apportionment indicator will need to be activated. If this field is left blank, MyUI will interpret this response as an N. Finally, we will indicate whether or not this is the employer's final wage report they will have, because they are terminating or inactivating the business. We will enter Y if yes and N if no. If this field is left blank, MyUI will interpret that as an N. We will now move on to the employee record by selecting Enter. Notice that we are now on line 2. This is because this is the second record within the file. All employee records will begin with the RW record identifier. Like with the employer record, commas must be used to separate each field. Next, we will once again enter the employer account number for the business associated with this employee. Now we will enter the 3-digit reporting unit number to identify the employee's work site. This number is also known as the location number. For single unit employers, you will enter 000. We will then enter the quarter we are reporting for. Remember that this quarter should match the quarter for the above employer record. For each of the 3 months in the quarter, we will then add separate indicators to show whether or not the employee worked for the employer during the pay period that included the 12th day of each month. A 1 will indicate yes, while a 0 will indicate no. Now we will enter the Social Security number or SSN for the employee. Do not include any hyphens when entering this. Leave this section blank without spaces if you do not yet have the employee's Social Security number. Note that the missing SSN will result in a non-fatal error being applied for the record. You will need to correct this in a timely fashion or penalties may be assessed. Now it's time to enter the name of the employee starting with their last name. Note that apostrophes and hyphens are allowed. If there is no last name, include a comma with no space to move on to the next field. This field can be up to 30 characters long. If the last name exceeds 30 characters, just enter the first 30. Now it's time to enter in the first name. This field can be up to 15 characters long. If the first name exceeds 15 characters, just enter the first 15. Once again, if there is no first name, include a comma with no space. Note that while the system will allow you to leave blanks in place of the first name or last name, missing these details will result in a non-fatal error being applied for the record. You will need to correct this in a timely fashion or penalties may be assessed. Now it's time to enter the middle name or initial. This field can be up to 30 characters long. If the middle name exceeds 30 characters, just enter the first 30. Again, if there is no middle name or initial, include a comma with no space. Now we will enter the UI gross wages paid to the employee during the reporting period. Note that there should be no commas or decimals included. The last 2 digits will be considered the cents figure. For example, if the employee made $10,000.99 in one quarter, we would enter 1000099 in the field. Note that the field can be up to 30 characters long. Now we will enter either a Y or an N for the seasonal indicator, which indicates whether the employee worked during the pay period that included seasonal wages during this reporting period. Note that seasonal employment is not automatic. A seasonal employer must apply for seasonal designation by UIA at least 20 days before the season starts. Given our employer does not have an approved seasonal designation, we will enter N. If this field is left blank, the seasonal indicator will default to an N. Next, enter a Y if the employee is an owner or officer of the business, and an N if they are not. If this field is left blank, the system will default to an N. Next, enter the proper adjustment code for the record. A code of 0 means that this is an original filing, and a code of 1 means that it is an adjustment because of incorrectly reported wages. A blank field will be treated as a 0 if this is an original filing, or as a 1 for an adjustment. For a description of the adjustment codes, review the file format instructions on MyUI University. The next field captures wages subject to the additional obligation tax when it is triggered for the state of Michigan. Since the obligation assessment is not currently triggered, we will place a 0 here. Now we can enter the visa wage indicator to indicate whether there are wages paid for foreign workers to report. This will only be required for when obligation tax is in effect. Y is entered if visa wages are active, while N is entered if visa wages are not active. The system will interpret blanks as an N. Now we can add the two-letter out-of-state abbreviation if there are out-of-state wages that were paid and credit is being requested. If not, we can skip this field altogether. For this employee, we will skip this field, but for our next one, we will have out-of-state wages to report. Finally, we will enter the out-of-state wage amount. Given that this is not applicable to us, we will skip this field altogether or add a comma. Note that this field has a maximum character count of 30. No decimals or commas should be entered as the last two digits will represent the cents figure. Now that we have entered the record for one of our employees, we will now enter the record for our final employee. We will once again click Enter to begin this record on line 3, and will then type the RW record identifier. Next, we will enter the employer account number for the business associated with this employee. Now let's enter our unit number. Next, we will enter the quarter we are submitting for, making sure it matches the employer and the other employee in the file. We will now enter in our indicators to show whether or not the employee worked for the employer during the pay period that included the 12th day of the month for each of the months in the quarter. We will enter 0 for the first month to indicate that the individual was not an employee of our business at the time in January. Now we will enter the Social Security number of the employee. Remember, do not include any hyphens when entering this. Let's now enter the name of the employee, starting with the last name. Let's enter the first name. And lastly, let's enter the middle name or initial. Now we will enter the UI gross wages paid to the employee during the reporting period. Again, there should be no commas or decimals included. The last two digits will be considered the cents figure. Now we will enter the seasonal indicator, which indicates whether or not the employee worked during the pay period that included seasonal wages during this reporting period. Enter a Y if seasonal and an N if not seasonal. Once again, the system will interpret blanks as an N. Next, insert Y if the employer is an owner or officer of the business, and an N if they are not. As a reminder, if this field is left blank, the system will default to an N. Next, enter the proper adjustment code for the record. A code of 10 means that you are submitting out-of-state wages. Here, let's enter the obligation gross wages paid. Because the obligation assessment is not currently active, we will add a 0 here as we did for the other employee record. Let's continue by entering the visa wage indicator to indicate whether there are foreign worker wages to report. As a reminder, this will only be required for when the obligation tax is in effect, and a blank response will be interpreted as an N. Once again, we'll enter an N here. Next, we can add the two-letter out-of-state abbreviation if there are out-of-state wages that were paid and credit is being requested. Because we will report out-of-state wages for this employee, we will type OH here for Ohio. Finally, we will enter the out-of-state wage amount. This field has a maximum character count of 30. Again, no decimals or commas should be entered here, as the last two digits will represent the cents figure. Congratulations! We are now ready to submit our delimited file.